This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders that are designing the future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and today I've got Bob Kosas on the pod. Bob is the president and COO of Aptean and one of the most respected leaders in tech sales. Bob has spent more than 25 years building high-performing teams, closing complex deals, and coaching the top 1% of sellers. His new book, The President's Club Mindset, Inside the Winning Strategies of Tech's Most Successful Salespeople, he breaks down the discipline, resilience, and customer focus that drive consistent, elite performance. If you want to look inside how great sellers think and lead, Bob brings the playbook. Bob Kosas, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Joe, for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And so, Bob, I have this thing about all you need is one. You need the one thing to break through. Whether you're a business person or whether you're an entertainer. Tom Cruise had his risky business. He had his one that broke him out and he became a successful actor. And I think this happens with people in all walks of life. They just need that one. Some people may call it a break, but some people may call it a success. And the reason I bring it up is because your one was a $138 commission check, which you write about in the book as kind of your first big, it was kind of I don't know if it shaped the rest of your career, but it was one of those mile markers where you look back and that was my one.
It was a humbling moment. And I'll never forget it. I remember coming home and my wife actually saying, "What are we supposed to do with this?" Because it was $138, right? What do you do with a $130 commission check? We had just moved to California, just moved the kids from Minnesota to California. I so-called got a promotion. I was supposed to have more responsibility, supposed to be making more money. And then this check arrives, right? And it was definitely a humbling moment, but it really got me to refocus my priorities.
And tell me about that, because you write in the book about you were focused very much about yourself. It was all Bob Kocis all the time. What was it that helped refocus that, and the fact, obviously it was this check, but also the responsibilities that you had on top?
It was a combination of both. What I realized is that, and I had done really well up to that point and on many things, right? And what I realized is that I had always been laser focused on myself. Hey, why am I not getting promoted faster? Why am I not making more money? Why are you not paying me more? Why is my title not bigger? Right. And I was just, what I realized is that was the wrong approach. At that moment, it kind of really clicked. I said, you know what? I got this wrong. I need to be focused on making my team successful, making my customers successful, making the people around me successful, lifting everybody up, and not worrying about myself. And that's what I did. That was the moment where I said, I want to make that shift. And it was amazing. I started doing that. And guess what? All the things I talked about I wanted, they all kind of just came naturally without me ever having to ask. They just came naturally because I was focused on the other things that made me successful, the most important things, which were the team, the customers, the people around me.
And what was it that flipped that switch, Bob? Was it you went to Tony Robbins' seminar? Was there a water splashing the face moment? What was it, do you think?
No, it's a great question. I don't know if there's anything that kind of triggered it. I think that I had some really good leaders in my life, some really good mentors. And I think the one that probably shaped my early career at that point was a gentleman by the name of Mark Christ, who I write a lot about in the book. But Mark was all about really lifting others and investing all your energy and time and your talents into others to make them better. And if you did that, he really felt like things would multiply for you, right? So that was one of Mark's lessons. So I think I probably grabbed that from Mark, but I probably never implemented it. I probably had it in a storage bank, but it wasn't coming out, right? I was still too worried about myself. So it was an interesting moment. I actually got challenged. I'll just add on to that real quick. I got challenged by one of my managers at that time because I had two really great salespeople working for me, and I was advocating for both of them to get promoted. And he's like, well, hold on a minute. If both of these gentlemen get promoted, you're going to lose your best two people. I don't understand why you're advocating for these people to get promoted, because your team's going to be weaker. And I told him that story. I said, because I have confidence in myself. I know I'm going to go find great people. These folks are going to go do great for the company, and they're going to build new teams that are going to do phenomenal. And we're all going to lift, right? We're all going to rise up. So that was the approach I started taking.
That's great. And, I will say, I think, not to make excuses for you, Bob, but the world of sales is very much a solitary sport. Like it's not. I know we all like talk about a sales team, and you probably use all the sports euphemisms of it being a team, but sometimes it's very solitary where it's like it's more like golf or tennis, where if you don't execute, it doesn't matter what the rest of the team could be fantastic, but if you're not like winning the matches or scoring some points, you're not doing well. So tell me how you thread that needle. And I want to get into the President's Club and being part of organizations and teams, but like I've always felt like that's always been the rub for salespeople is like, yeah, they all got to be gung ho and be on everyone's same team, marching at the same beat, marching at the same drum, all that whole jazz. But the fact that at the end of the day, you got to close the sale. You're the one
Right.
that's got to bring in the bucks. Who
Right.
cares what everyone else is doing? But then you still have to.
So here's the difference between what I consider when I talk about the President's Club mindset. I really talk about the elite seller. Like I was using this example of, did you ever hear of a name of PGA golfer named Shawn Michael? Right. And everybody, when I say that, everybody says no. And he won the PGA title, I think in 2007 or something. So he's won a major championship, but you've never heard the man's name, right? But if I ask you if you ever heard Tiger Woods, well, everybody says yes. Well, Tiger's won 14 major titles. And what's the difference between the two? One is the consistency that the elite bring. They are consistent year after year, day after day. They do all the small things right, but they also assemble great teams around them. So the elite performers in tech sales or in any sales organization, they have this uncanny ability to lead people without even the people knowing that they're being led. And they bring all the best talent from the company with them to close the sale, to run the sale, to move the sale forward, and to eventually close the deal. And that's one of the big differences, because it is an individual sport, but the elite performer doesn't make it seem that way. They just act differently. And, I have example of how that has worked in real life. But if you go talk to most great salespeople, they'll tell you it's much because of all the great people they brought along with them, with all different disciplines, whether it's an executive or a specialist in a product or whatever that discipline might be. It's those people that make them successful.
Excellent. Fair enough. All right. So you talk about the elite, and for the sales nerds that this might pop on their feed, they're fully aware of what the President's Club is. For the non-sales nerds, tell us about the President's Club.
So look, every company some companies call it different things, but the President's Club is basically a trip that happens annually for the elite performers. So maybe it's the top 10% of the organization, the top 5% of the organization. And what typically happens is those top performers in most companies will go on some very special trip to some unbelievable location. They'll get to bring their spouse, their significant other, and it'll just be a phenomenal time. And it's a bit of a club. And once you're in, and it's done on purpose this way. Once you're in, you never want to miss, because you don't want to miss that opportunity, that trip, right? And like I said, some companies do it differently. They don't call it President's Club. They might call it Passport to Success, or they have all kinds of names that exist out there. But it's all kind of the same theme. And it's that, how do you get the best of the best to really be fighting for that opportunity to be part of this special club?
And obviously things turned out well for you because you even write a book about being part of this club. But it wasn't all sunshines and rainbows for Bob Kocis. You missed out on President's Club one year, and you talk about it in the book. Tell me about what was like. Well, first of all, like, was that like one of those where you had to look yourself in the mirror and be like, what happened? What did you look inward? Did you look outward? How did you approach that miss?
Yeah, I did. I kind of did both. I think what happened for me was I had always kind of made it naturally and done all the little things to make it. And I think the year that I didn't, it was back when I was kind of way too focused on myself and too focused on why is this not happening? Why is that not happening? And I took my eye off the ball. The piece that I talk about a lot is consistency, and the ability to execute consistently over and over again, right? And do all the little things correctly day in, day out. If you take your eye off that for a long period of time, it's going to eventually get you. And that's what happened to me. I took my eye off of that. I was worried about other things that weren't going to lead to my success. But the good news is for me, I was able to quickly like refocus and get back in and get back on track quickly. But I think that's a big piece of it.
And you talk a lot about the fact that you kind of you were a hustler. You most of your success was by outgrinding everybody else. And it is funny now, Bob, I'm sure as you look at the new work culture, that hustle culture is kind of being kind of like pushed to the side. Like we don't want it to be about all the hustle all the time. It's about like, making sure there's that work life balance, if you believe in it or not. There's more about like, importance the importance of your mental health. You obviously you hit the gas and went through all that. But tell me about those days of just being able to do it just on sheer will alone. And then obviously you talk about how you had to kind of re-engineer the way you do things, but the fact that you just thought out hustling everyone was the way to go.
Well, I did. I always knew that I wasn't necessarily the smartest person, and I wasn't gonna invent something. So I was taking what other people did, and I said, okay, I know I got to work harder. I know I got to move faster. I was fairly smart. I went to the Merchant Marine Academy. I had a good degree. I went to nuclear power school, so I had enough brain matter going on that I could figure this out. But I knew I had to outwork everybody. So in my early days, if the manager would say, "Hey, you got to do 2 demonstrations a week," I would try to do 4 or 2 demonstrations a day. In tech sales, I would try to do 4. Right? I would try to do more than everybody else, and I would try to outpace them. And that's a lot of how I got it done, because I figured more touches, you're going to get more opportunities, and that's just part of it. But I want to circle back to your other question, which was around today's work ethic and the work-life balance, all those other things. By the way, those things are still important. Like, even though I grinded, I hustled, I did all these things, I still made sure I coached my kids in sports. I still made sure I made their events. I still made sure like all those things happen. Like, those are important things. Like, you don't want to throw those things away and not do things like that because you're focused on your career. You can do both. You could be great at your career, and you can also be great with your kids and your family and everything you're doing, right? You don't have to give up one or the other. So I want to make sure that that's understood. But I think that in today's culture, which you kind of said, early, it is different. But what I'm seeing more recently is young people coming into sales roles, and I have many today in my current company, Aptean, and they are hungry. They're coming in early, they're working late, they're smart, they're energized, they want to be successful. I mean, it's actually exciting. And then even outside of sales, like on the coding side or other positions, they're excited about AI. They're excited about doing new things. I mean, there's a lot of excitement out there in corporate America and in the tech world. And I think this younger generation, although sometimes they get a bad rap on things, because I think there is some of what you talk about out there, I think there's a lot of goodness going on too. Just to share that with you.
And it's funny too, talking about how you were able to accomplish that work-life balance at a time where that really didn't exist. Like most people didn't. That phrase didn't. That phrase was not existed back when you were coming up through the ranks.
Right.
But it's all about the time management. And I remember seeing this video of Jerry Seinfeld, and it was one of those like on the street interviews with like a video paparazzi guy, and he said to him like, "How do you have time to do all these things that you're doing, because you're doing like a movie and a special and all this other stuff?" And as you know, with Jerry Seinfeld, he's often very prickly-ish when it comes to
Right.
answers.
Right. Yeah.
He said something that really struck me, and it was like, I have the same hours a day you do. I probably sleep 8 to 10 hours like you do, and then I find a way to get stuff done during my waking hours. He said it in a more rude fashion than I did, but it was just basically like, you can do what I do. Like, you have the same amount of time. Tell me about the time management and how you were able to do that, because like Jerry said, you got the same amount of time everybody else does, but you're still able to accomplish all that.
Yeah, that is a great analogy, and you have to manage your time well. You have to be efficient with every moment of the day, right? And it's whether it's managing your calendar or making sure, like for example, in the earlier days when I was hitting the streets and pounding the pavement, as they would call it, selling, I had to make sure I had my phones and all my phone numbers programmed in for all my cold calls when I was traveling to an appointment. So you would dial them one after another. Today, the young professionals that are doing this, they're going to have it on auto dialer, have some other technology they're using to do that, which is great, but they still have to plan. They still have to get organized. And the other thing to say on that around time management is most companies will give the seller all the great technology and tools to go do the job in the most efficient fashion. And what I've learned is the elite sellers, they use all that. They use it better than everybody else. The people that complain about it say, "Oh, we got too much technology. You're giving us too many things. We're We can't do all this. Those folks typically, what I see is they don't make it, or they don't rise to the level of performance they should rise to. But the people that adopt it and they leverage all of it, they find a way to be incredibly efficient and manage their time incredibly wisely. But it's very doable. You just gotta. It's like anything else. It's like running a sales campaign or anything else you do in business. You have to focus on it.
That's awesome. You mentioned cold calling, and I keep hearing this cold calling is dead, and substitute with cold emailing is dead. Is it like is this world of cold calling someone out of the blue dead? Because that's the as we came up through the ranks, that was pretty much it. You had the phone book, you bought a list. I remember from Glengarry Glen Ross, you got the list. But like nowadays, because of phone screening, I mean, literally, if you have an iPhone, it will screen all your calls now, so you don't even have to pick up the phone anymore for
Right.
anything. Tell me about the idea of cold calls here in 2025 and 26.
Yeah, I don't think it's dead. It's just different.
Okay.
It's going to be how you lead. At the end of the day, for you to be successful on a cold call, what has to happen? You have to somehow catch somebody at a point in time where they have a pain, or they have a problem that they can't solve, and you happen to be solving that problem. I mean, that's really the situation that has to happen, right? So it's a bit of a needle in a haystack, but it's just different. Whether the approach is to get referred in, whether the approach is to kind of do it differently via text or via LinkedIn or however it is, there's different approaches. Like, instead of me getting as many cold calls as I used to, as president and COO of a company, I get a lot of cold calls. Yeah. I get a lot more now. I get LinkedIn mail. I might get email. I might get text messages. I get different ways. People are figuring out different ways of doing things. Even going back to some old school ways of writing letters and doing some unique things that I find pretty interesting. So people are getting very creative for how they do it. And I applaud them. I applaud the young sellers that are getting creative and finding a way to get in the door, because it's not easy. But if they really are passionate about what they're doing, if they're really passionate about the fact that they're really solving a meaningful problem for the customer, they should find a way to get to the customer. I mean, that's their job.
And let's talk how your ethos kind of shifted from the hard sell to solving problems. And you hear about this a lot with salespeople. Like, it's hard. You really can't. I think people are over being sold to. Like, it's like we all grew up in a generation of, whether you're a Generation X or a millennial, like, you've always had technology in your face trying to sell you something. So you made this shift to problem solving. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I think it probably came from my engineering background, but the way I thought about things was, I said, look, we have this unbelievable technology, whatever the technology was at the time we were using, and it's solving a business problem for the customer. So the first thing you have to do is you have to unpack that problem for the client, understand where the pain exists, right? And then apply your technology to solve that pain point. And that's when it kind of really clicks, when you can start to really understand what the client's pain is. And the thing that I like to say is, you got to be curious, right? You have to be curious with the client. You have to understand, what are they really doing? And I coach salespeople to say, when you're being curious, you got to have what I call agenda-free listening. So what that means is that a lot of people listen, but they have their own agenda going on in their head, like they want to lead the witness, right? You can't do that. You really have to just park all that, put your head where your feet are, and you have to get in there, and you really have to have agenda-free listening, which is be curious, ask questions, ask follow-up questions, understand what they said to you in the moment. Don't try to put your own will on them. And when you do that, the customers will open up to you, because customers have pain they're trying to solve, and they are looking for people to help them solve it. Then once you can uncover that and learn more about the client, you'll find opportunities, and then you can actually be value added to the client.
Nice.
So that's the approach that I've taken, and I've seen the best sellers do that over and over again. Matter of fact, in the book, I interview 10 sellers that have 150 President's Club combined, over 150 combined. And curiosity was one of the common themes of what made them successful.
And the other theme in the book that you talk about is empathy.
Yes.
And it's funny because Bill McDermott wrote a nice little blurb for the at the beginning of your book, and I remember this quote from Bill 5 years ago at the height of the pandemic. He said, "The future is going to require empathy at scale." And I often joke, Bob, that like it took a global pandemic for leaders to learn about empathy. Like before 2020, no one gave a shit about anybody, but now because of the pandemic, people talk about empathy. But you write about empathy, and tell me, and I know this is from the outsider's perspective, like, the idea of a salesperson and empathy. How does that work? Like how does, to me, as someone who's always been on the receiving end of it, it's always like they don't care about me. They just want me to buy what they're selling.
Right.
So tell me about the empathy piece when it comes to selling.
Yeah, I think if you, it's great point. If and most people do feel that way, but here's the reality: is if you really try to put the customer's best interest at heart, and you have a vision for when the client's done buying my product, I want them to be a raving fan. I want them to be a reference. I want them to tell other people about me. If that's your end goal, empathy will come natural because you will care about the client all the way through the journey. If your goal is to end at the commission check, you will not be empathetic because your goal, once that commission check comes, you're basically done with that sale. But the great sellers, they care about the entire process. They care about getting that customer all the way because they know if that customer is successful, they're going to refer them to other clients. They're going to be a reference from them on the next deal that they're competing with a big competitor. They're going to win that deal. The great ones, that's what they do differently.
Hmm. And it's always funny in the world of sales, and you've probably endured this because you've been doing it for so long and it helped people along this way, is the fact that sales in itself has terrible PR. Like the idea of a salesperson, it almost has, without this being offensive, it almost has like a negative connotation. Like salesperson just it brings up bad feelings. And if you look at cinema and television, there's rarely ever like a good salesperson. The salesperson is always a scam artist or they're out for themselves. So how much of your work
So
is
true.
also part of that, like, correction of what a salesperson's role is really like? Or do you not think about this? This could be just me
No,
projecting it out, but I always feel like you never see like something about a great salesperson. It's always about a salesperson who's done something bad.
well, also, Joe, I mean, if you're watching a movie and the parents are saying, "Well, I want you to go be a doctor or lawyer," you never see a parent say, "I want you to go be a great salesperson." Like,
Right.
no, people, that isn't in the movie, right? That the people aren't doing that. But yeah, I think, you know, as this generation has matured, and I think there's so many great sellers out there, and sales has been an unbelievable career, especially in high tech for so many people. I think you're seeing a next generation of people that actually aspire to be in sales. They've seen their parents succeed. They've seen other folks succeed in the industry that are close to them. And they've seen that they've not only had a great lifestyle, but it's a very well respected profession. And it could be a very fun profession too, right? And you're also dealing with a lot of cutting edge technology and new things that I think are exciting for young folks. So I think those things are really important. But I really don't dwell on it. To me, I think it's the greatest profession ever. I absolutely love it. It's been incredibly good to me and my family. And that's kind of the way I look at it.
That's awesome. No, it's good. And it is funny too how the sales industry in general has shifted, because I remember, I don't know if you're aware of like Dan Kennedy. He's like that magnetic marketing guy, how to get people to, and I remember one line from the book is, at the end of the day, your job is to remove money from one person's wallet into your pocket. Like that's what he kind of like the brass tacks. And I think Dan Kennedy's probably like a boomer or something like that. So there was this idea of like 30, 40 years ago, it was just that, the transaction. And we've seen now that it's not only just the end game, but also what the ripple effects of that are to that. So tell me about how your industry has shifted of like, yeah, sure, we got to close a deal, but that deal can't be like the door closed forever, because it's got to open up to maybe another deal down the line. Or again, like you said, create raving fans where they're talking to other people. So tell me how that's shifted in your industry, about the fact that it's not just about the sale, but like the experience of the sale, or as the kids now say, Bob, the vibe of the
The
sale.
vibe, exactly the vibe. I think it's actually started shifting in the mid '90s. I mean, when I first kind of got into sales in general in the early '90s, it really was about just closing the deal, and customer success and those things weren't paramount for how we treated people. And I think as people realized more competitors came on the market, you had to compete harder to win deals. Technology was moving faster. The outcome of where the customer ended up was really critical. They started to realize that they had to change their approach, right? It just wasn't, you could go do a software demo and then demand a closing, and almost like a Glenn Ross type attitude of this thing has to close, right? So I think that all started to change. I think the 2000s, it really changed, right? And that's when the whole sales process around really focusing on the success of the client, the outcome, becoming that trusted advisor with the client, and then getting repeat sales and growing share of wallet with the client over time. All those things became a reality because then software started to become more of a platform play and less of a transaction play. You know, in the 90s, it was still very much a transactional type of situation. Now it's much more of a long-term relationship where you're with a client long-term. They're investing in you, you're investing in them. And the goal is to have them for a very long time. And hopefully they use more of your products over time, right? That's the goal. So if you treat them right and you treat them and you service them properly, you have a great opportunity to sell to them for a very long period of time. And that's what the elite performers do. They just treat their clients unbelievably well and they take care of them. And they yell from the rooftops if somebody's not treating their client right. I mean, they don't care if they calling me or calling the CEO of the company or whoever. If their client's not getting treated right, they will advocate for their client heavily internally. But not everybody does that.
And I think a reason that paradigm shifted a little bit, Bob, was probably like the cost of acquisition. As you know, you probably know the numbers better than me. The client acquisition costs are just like skyrocketing. And the more and more customers you can keep, obviously,
Yes.
you don't have to worry about that cost of acquisition of. So tell me about that. Like, how does that play into the fact that like people spend so much money in acquiring customers, whether it's through marketing or any kind of other platform that they're using, that like being able to retain those people is what keeping a lot of companies afloat, is the idea that these people are going to be with you for the long haul.
No, yeah, you hit it nail on the head. I mean, it's all about, how do you need to keep the customer acquisition cost down, right? And as low as you possibly can. But if you're able to keep a client for 8, 10, 12 years, right? You can spend a little bit more money acquiring a customer. If you're at risk of losing a customer in 3 to 5 years, you're going to have to find a way to bring that customer acquisition cost a little bit lower, right? So a lot of it depends on that. So that's why I think the ability to create platforms and products that are sticky and then marry them with really good service and a sales approach that is more of a partnership. So the company is partnering with you, the customer is partnering with you, sorry, I think is really critical. I think that makes a big difference, in today's tech world.
Sweet. Dipping back into your book, you talk about these 10 elite sellers, hundreds of presidents clubs they've been part of. Now that you're looking back, book's done. Was there one behavior that you learned from any of the top performers that surprised you, or maybe there was a pattern that you're like, oh, I didn't, even though you're a top performer, speaking to these others, we're like, oh, I didn't, or maybe it's something that you did or didn't even realize you had this trait. Was there something you learned from these other top performers?
There absolutely is. If you would have asked me before I wrote the book, like what I thought the top things would come out, I would not have said curiosity.
Okay.
And that theme was just rampant through the interviews. As we interviewed people, they would just say, like, we had one gentleman, Bob Galata, who, I don't remember if it's 21 or 29 President's Clubs, but he won a whole lot of President's Clubs. At one point he won 21 in a row. I think it was 29 total. And he said his number one thing was curiosity.
Wow.
The ability to engage with the client, be curious. Like I said before, have that agenda-free listening and going in there and just really understanding what they needed and then finding a way to solve their problems, right? But it all started with being curious, And I thought that was, I didn't expect that, Joe, to come out of there like that.
That's interesting.
But that was pretty interesting.
And how about lessons that you learned? Like, because I'm sure this was probably an education to you. Were there any of those lessons that maybe happened that came up during the conversations of the book, or even earlier in your life, that have sort of lived through you and is kind of ingrained in your DNA in terms of like these other elite sellers that have rubbed off on you?
No, for sure. I think I think a few other things. One is being proactive. I talk about it in the book, but I think elite sellers are proactive. They look ahead, they look around corners. They might be approaching you as a potential client and, not thinking about maybe selling you something now, but like, how can I get your business a year from now when this happens? They're thinking that far in advance and they're building towards that event. And that's all about being a proactive seller. And I think that the elite sellers, the ones that I interviewed in the book and the ones that I know in my professional life, they're like that. They're very much like that. They understand that it may not be today, right? And that's okay. It's not about today. It's about building that rapport in that relationship so that at some point, you can win the business. I've even, I used to tell clients, look, I understand you're not changing vendors, but I like to earn the right to be your number two, because if something ever happens, I want to be the first phone call. And that worked incredibly well, because clients they would still have lunch with me occasionally. They would read my emails. They would stay in touch. And then eventually at some point when something didn't go right, I would at least have an opportunity to win the business. So sometimes you got to take that approach.
One of the things you're right about, look, I want to pick your brain on. It's like, and especially the world you live is mostly selling tech, right? But you say that tech buyers want confidence. And so, as you know, that confidence world can sometimes leak into cockiness. So how do you portray confidence without coming across as cocky?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think you have to do it through third party. Everybody, not everybody, but most companies out there, most sellers, they're very excited about what they're offering, what they've built, what they're offering, especially the engineers who have built the products, right? But it really comes down to, do you have referenceability and people out there in the industry that are willing to stand up and say, hey, we're using this today. We're really getting value. We're getting return on investment. This is really working for us. And when that starts to happen, I think that's when you can portray, more and more confidence, to your potential buyer. And I think that's probably what makes a difference. But those things are important. And a lot of times sellers, I write this in the book, but a lot of times sellers, they won't fill their own references. And I coach people that yes, you can go get references from marketing. You can get them off a corporate webpage. Like, you could do that. That's fine. You can read about them in blogs and wherever else. But the most powerful references are when you have your own references. When you have customers that I can get on the phone, like today, I know customers I can get on the phone today and ask them to do a call for me, and they will absolutely take the call and tell the customer about how I delivered on time, how I delivered on budget, how we made sure we promises. And by the way, if there was a problem, which there is sometimes, because this stuff is very complicated, we solved it for them. We didn't back off. We attacked it, and we said, how are we going to solve this for you? So those are things I think are really important that people need to realize, is having that network, having your own references that are out there. Boy, there's hardly anything more powerful than that, that I've seen.
And obviously early in your career, you were probably a little cocky, you're a little full of yourself, and you talked about how you realized that you had to move beyond yourself. And, circling back to the beginning of the conversation, you say success followed you once you served your team and customers. You kind of mentioned that earlier. What is one example where you put the rep first and saw the payoff later?
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. So I think from a standpoint of when I first became a leader and kind of built these teams out, and I started to have more sellers, what I realized is that you had to go on the road with, even though you weren't getting paid commission for these deals, even though you had to get out there and show them like how it's done. So it's really that ability to get with them, sit with them, actually coach them. When you're in the car with them, you put away your phones. You don't text. You're in the car. What are you doing? You're role playing. Is Tiger Woods, sitting around texting people before the match, or is he on the range hitting 300 golf balls? So why are tech sellers in the car with their manager going to an appointment and they're not role playing the appointment? Why are they both on their phones answering text messages or whatever they're doing? Yeah. I find that crazy. You need to practice. You need to prepare the same way a professional athlete's preparing, regardless of what that is. I had one of my sales VPs today. He called me up, and he's doing a pitch deck that we're certifying the whole company on, but he is out there doing it because he's a leader. He's a frontline leader. He's going to make sure he's the best at it, right? So I think those type of things about how you invest in your people really is the difference maker there. And I think you just got to be unselfish in how you do it. You got to just put your heart and soul into those folks and let them take that, and make sure when you're with them, you're giving them 100% of your mind share.
That's great. You may want to swap out the Tiger Woods analogy, because he's probably texting the waitress at Waffle House. So maybe use a different athlete.
Like use Jack Nicklaus or
go with an old school one, because we don't know anything about them.
Yeah. Okay.
Swap
all
out
right,
the Tiger
I like
one.
it. I like it.
So Bob, I always wrap up these conversations taking folks' plan dedication of the book, and you dedicate your book to your wife, Doreen, who you took to your 7th grade Halloween dance. I can only imagine what it's been like married to Bob Kocis over the years, but like, tell me the importance of why it was important to dedicate the book to Doreen.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, we've been together a long time. She helped me get into sales. She kind of booted me out the door and said, "You need to go get this first sales job," when the time came. And then when I finally got a break, she quit her teaching job, raised our 3 kids, and was an awesome stay-at-home mom, and allowed me to go do all the things I had to do to go build a successful career. So it's that partnership, that teamwork that we kind of had, and it's been really awesome because I wouldn't have made it without her. It was really special.
Awesome. Well, you could see what Doreen made in the President's Club mindset inside the winning strategies of tech's most successful salespeople. Bob Kocis. Bob, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Bob and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.